he got jealous of me because I didn't break my nose or anything like that. He would kind of just beat me up, kick me in the body, or...
For decades, he's been one of Hollywood's most iconic action stars. A man of few words on screen, and often, even fewer in interviews. But is he really the quiet giant he appears to be? Because behind the stoic silence, a few storms have definitely been brewing. Today, we're breaking down the 5 most intense and complicated relationships of Dolph Lundgren's career. These aren't just minor disagreements. They're stories of on-set explosions, calculated publicity stunts, and bitter rivalries that help define an action legend. He's an enigma wrapped in muscle. A guy with a master's degree in chemical engineering and a Fulbright scholarship to MIT who decided, nah, I'll be a cinematic titan instead, known for breaking bodies and delivering cold, hard justice. We know him as Ivan Drago, the near-silent Soviet killing machine. As He-Man, the master of the universe, as Gunnar Jensen, the volatile member of the Expendables. But who is the man behind the characters? For years, Dolph Lundgren has maintained an image of professional cool, but that carefully built image hides a history of conflict. In the high-stakes, high-testosterone world of 80s and 90s action filmmaking, egos clashed like titans, and sets often became battlegrounds. Friendships were forged in fire, but rivalries were born from ice-cold disrespect. And Lundgren, for all his brains and quiet demeanor, was no exception. He's worked with everyone, and it turns out he hasn't forgotten the co-stars who pushed him to the absolute edge. This isn't just a list of petty grievances. These are the stories of profound disrespect, of power plays that nearly came to blows, and of complex, decades-long feuds that simmered just beneath the surface of Hollywood's biggest blockbusters. We're pulling back the curtain on the rivalries that shaped, and in some cases, nearly derailed, one of action cinema's most enduring careers. Before Ivan Drago, before He-Man, before Dolph Lundgren was a household name, he was a bodyguard. His client? The one and only Grace Jones, one of the most electric and unpredictable performers of the era. Theirs was a whirlwind romance that catapulted Lundgren from the world of academia right into the stratosphere of pop culture. When Jones was cast as the villain Mayday in the 1985 James Bond film A View to a Kill, she made sure her towering blonde boyfriend came along for the ride. Lundgren's casting is now the stuff of legend. He was just visiting Jones on set when the director needed a last-minute replacement for an extra to play a KGB henchman. And just like that, a chemical engineer became Dolph Lundgren, the movie actor. But the relationship that gave him his start was also the source of his first major Hollywood pressure cooker. Grace Jones wasn't just his girlfriend. She was his mentor and his champion. She introduced him to Andy Warhol, took him to Studio 54, and was the one who encouraged him to pursue acting. But that dynamic of patron and protege began to strain as Lundgren's own star started to rise with meteoric speed. The flashpoint came during the casting of Rocky F. After landing an audition for the role of a lifetime, the world of Rocky suddenly became a problem. That world belonged to Sylvester Stallone. According to Lundgren, his relationship with Jones created immediate friction with the film's star. He recalled Stallone pulling him aside with a warning about getting too friendly with his then-wife, Brigitte Nielsen. The tension seemed to stem directly from the complicated power dynamics of his high-profile relationship with Jones. The pressure wasn't just external. The relationship itself reportedly grew strained as Lundgren's career exploded. He was no longer just Grace Jones's boyfriend. He was Ivan Drago, a character about to become a global phenomenon. As Lundgren gained fame and independence, the power dynamic in their relationship shifted, leading to tension. She had helped build him up, but now his own identity was taking shape, and it was an identity that was rapidly outgrowing her shadow. While Lundgren has never spoken with overt negativity about Jones, always acknowledging the immense impact she had on his life. The circumstances point to a period of intense conflict. He was navigating a new career, a romance with a notoriously volatile superstar, and the jealousies of Hollywood's elite. The end of their relationship marked the end of his beginning. It was a necessary break that allowed him to forge his own path, but it began with a complex lesson. In Hollywood, relationships are currency, and sometimes you have to start fresh to build your own empire. The set of Rocky IV was a crucible, a hyper-masculine environment orchestrated by Sylvester Stallone to create the ultimate Cold War showdown. To play Ivan Drago, the invincible Soviet boxer, a 27-year-old Dolph Lundgren didn't just act, he became the character. And for his first major scene, he was pitted against a franchise veteran, the legendary Carl Weathers, the man who was Apollo, Creed. The on-screen story was clear. Apollo Creed would be brutally sacrificed to establish the terrifying power of Ivan Drago. But behind the scenes, that story bled into reality. Lundgren has openly admitted that his relationship with Weathers on set was anything but friendly, describing a palpable tension from the moment they met. According to Lundgren, the conflict began with Weathers' natural apprehension. Here was this giant unknown actor, a real-life karate champion, who stayed in character as the cold, dangerous Drago even when cameras weren't rolling. Lundgren recalled, "He just saw this big fricking blonde guy who looks dangerous. I think Carl got a little bit like, am I really going to survive this fight?" That fear wasn't entirely misplaced. The fight choreography was notoriously brutal, with Stallone encouraging a level of realism that often blurred the line between performance and actual combat. For Weathers, an accomplished actor but not a champion martial artist, the experience was jarring. The tension finally boiled over during the filming of their fight. Weathers reportedly grew so upset with Lundgren's aggression in the ring that he stormed off the set, halting production for 4 days. Lundgren, for his part, felt the animosity was one-sided. He explained, "I knew Stallone because we boxed and trained together for 6 months, and he was my boss. But Carl, I didn't know." This created a dynamic where Lundgren felt aligned with Stallone, while Weathers was the outsider facing his character's demise at the hands of a newcomer. While Weathers himself later downplayed the incident, calling rumors of a cold feud publicity fodder and describing Lundgren as a sweet guy, Lundgren's own recollections paint a picture of genuine off-screen coldness. Even years later, after they had become friendlier, Lundgren sensed the ghost of how that conflict remained. "But I think he was always a little bit sore about what happened in Rocky I through IV, Lundgren stated, adding with a perfect wry touch, "I didn't write the script. Not all rivalries are born from screaming matches on set. Some just simmer. For years, born not from a single incident, but from a fundamental clash of philosophies and a deep-seated lack of professional respect. This seems to be the nature of Dolph Lundgren's feelings toward fellow action star Steven Seagal. The two have famously never worked together, so this wasn't a conflict forged in the heat of production. Instead, it played out in the court of public opinion within the action hero ecosystem. During the golden age of action cinema, there was a clear hierarchy. You had Stallone and Schwarzenegger at the top, with stars like Jean-Claude Van Damme and Dolph Lundgren just below. And then there was Steven Seagal. While hugely popular, Seagal carried a reputation that rubbed many of his peers the wrong way. The core of Lundgren's issue with Seagal seems to be a matter of authenticity. Both Lundgren and Van Damme came from legitimate martial arts backgrounds with verifiable championship titles. Seagal, on the other hand, practiced Aikido, and his claims about his past and fighting prowess were often viewed with skepticism. Stories of his on-set ego and questionable claims of working with the CIA created a persona that many, including Lundgren, apparently found irritating. Lundgren saw Seagal as the embodiment of ego over talent. While Lundgren was often criticized early on for his wooden acting, his reputation was built on genuine physical ability and quiet professionalism. Seagal, in this view, was the opposite, an actor whose persona felt propped up by a notoriously inflated ego. This simmering resentment was less about a personal slight and more about a professional offense to the discipline Lundgren held dear. When asked over the years about Seagal, Lundgren's responses have been telling, often couched in dry humor, that thinly veils his contempt. In one interview, when asked who was stronger between them, Lundgren's immediate joking reply was, "Stephen who?" He followed it up with a lukewarm, "He is a good guy," delivered with a knowing smile that suggested he already had his own answer. This rivalry is unique because it's about perception and principle. There was no single explosive fight. There was simply a long-standing, quiet judgment. Lundgren, the stoic intellectual with a legitimate fighting pedigree, seemed to look at Seagal and see a showman whose credibility he questioned. And for a man of principle like Dolph Lundgren, there is perhaps no greater sin. We are about to get into the top 2 most intense rivalries of Dolph Lundgren's entire career. These next 2 stories involve shouting matches, near brawls, and decades of complicated history with 2 of the biggest names in Hollywood. But before we reveal the number 2 and number 1 spots, if you're enjoying this deep dive into action movie history, make sure to hit that subscribe button and ring the bell for notifications. You won't want to miss what's next. Also, let us know in the comments, which Hollywood feud do you find the most fascinating? Now, on to the final 2. In the pantheon of 90s action rivalries, few were as perfectly matched as Dolph Lundgren versus Jean-Claude Van Damme. The towering Swede versus the high-kicking muscles from Brussels. They were the successors to the Stallone-Schwarzenegger throne. When they were finally cast opposite each other in the 1992 sci-fi action classic Universal Soldier, the studio knew they had box office gold. But the story of their feud is a masterclass in Hollywood showmanship, a bizarre blend of real tension and calculated publicity stunts. The most infamous incident happened not on set, but on the red carpet of the 1992 Cannes Film Festival. In front of a swarm of photographers, the 2 stars got into a heated argument. There was shouting, shoving, and for a moment it looked like a real fight was about to break out. The story exploded. It was the perfect narrative to promote Universal Soldier, a film where they play soldiers trying to kill each other. And that's because, as both men would later admit, the entire thing was a sham. The fight was a publicity stunt cooked up by the ever-savvy Van Damme, who called Lundgren and pitched the idea of creating some friction. Lundgren, the willing accomplice, played his part perfectly. The stunt worked, generating massive buzz. But here's where the line between fiction and reality blurs. While the Cannes fight was staged, it tapped into a very real competitive tension between them. They were constantly compared, vying for the same roles and the same audience. Bringing 2 alphas together was bound to create some ego clashes. Decades later, conflicting reports suggested the fake feud may have had roots in some real animosity. According to some sources, Van Damme grew frustrated with how Lundgren recounted the Cannes incident, feeling that Dolph would sometimes hint it was more spontaneous, manipulating the narrative to make himself look cooler. This reflects their complicated dynamic. Van Damme, the showman, always needed to be the one pulling the strings. Lundgren, the quiet observer, was happy to play along but was also keenly aware of his own image. On one hand, they became firm friends who collaborated on multiple films. On the other, there was always a professional rivalry simmering just beneath the surface. Their feud, whether real, fake, or somewhere in between, is a commentary on 90s action stardom. It was a performance within a performance, a complex dance between 2 icons who understood that in Hollywood, the greatest fight is often the one for the spotlight. There is no relationship in Dolph Lundgren's career more important, more volatile, or more defining than his 4-decade bond with Sylvester Stallone. It's not simply a feud, it's a saga of mentorship, betrayal, brotherhood, and bitter conflict. They are, as Lundgren himself described, kinda like family, with all the love and dysfunction that implies. For that reason, Stallone holds the undisputed #1 spot. Their story begins with a clash of titans on Rocky IV. Stallone, looking for an actor to play Ivan Drago, found himself both impressed and intimidated by Lundgren. He later joked that he cast Lundgren partly out of a genuine professional hatred born of envy. He was like the real Terminator, Stallone recalled. And I go, I hate this friggin' guy. He's just too perfect. And if I loathe him, I'm sure the world will. That initial feeling set the tone for a brutal production. Stallone, as the writer, director, and star, was Lundgren's boss, and he pushed him relentlessly. The most famous story is when Lundgren punched Stallone so hard during a take that he was sent to intensive care for several days. While it's a funny story now, it speaks to the incredibly intense environment Stallone cultivated. Their relationship was forged in real pain. For years, Lundgren was the grateful student. Stallone had given him his career. But when they reunited, Vatakitui. The Expendables. Franchise, the dynamic began to crack. The breaking point came during the filming of the first movie. Stallone, as director, grew frustrated with Lundgren's performance and publicly berated him in front of the entire cast, crew, and visiting international press. Lundgren recalled Stallone shouting things like, "My grandmother could do it better than that," and forcing him through 20 takes. The humiliation was profound. Lundgren described going to his trailer in tears, calling his then-wife and vowing, "If he says one more word, I'm gonna knock him out and fuck this movie. I'm out of here." A physical confrontation between the two legends was seconds away. Sensing the explosive atmosphere, Stallone approached Lundgren, tapped him on the back, and apologized, narrowly diffusing the situation. The incident marked a permanent shift. It was the moment the student finally stood up to the master. This new dynamic resurfaced during Creed II, when Lundgren argued with Stallone for 2 hours on set over how a scene was written. The most recent flare-up came in 2022 over a potential Drago spin-off film. Stallone, who has been in a bitter battle for the rights to his Rocky characters, was furious. He took to social media, blasting the producers, and in a shocking move, calling out Lundgren directly for what he felt was a betrayal. He wrote, "Real friends are more precious than gold." Lundgren quickly clarified that he was under the impression Stallone was involved. The two have since patched things up, but the incident exposed the deep wounds and complicated loyalties that define their friendship. Stallone is both the man who made Dolph Lundgren and the man who pushed him closest to the breaking point. It's a Hollywood story more dramatic than any script, a lifelong feud with the man he also calls his friend. So, there you have it. From the complex power dynamics with Grace Jones to the on-set intimidation of Carl Weathers and the principled disdain for Steven Seagal. From the manufactured rivalry with Jean-Claude Van Damme to the deeply personal family-like feud with his creator and tormentor, Sylvester Stallone. These 5 relationships reveal the hidden pressures that have defined Dolph Lundgren's career. They paint a picture of a man far more complex than his on-screen persona suggests. A man of intellect, discipline, and pride, navigating a world of colossal egos. His journey through Hollywood has been a battle on 2 fronts: the spectacular fights on screen and the quiet, often more brutal conflicts behind the scenes. These rivalries weren't just obstacles. They were the defining moments that shaped the man and the legend. What do you think? Which of these Hollywood conflicts shocked you the most? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. And don't forget to like this video and subscribe for more deep dives into the untold stories of Hollywood. Until next time.